I hear this story again and again. Most AI projects fail before they even start. And it's not because of the models, it's because companies can't get their data AI ready. Because the fact is, AI can't deliver results without the right data. And for many organizations, that is still the biggest challenge. While everyone is racing to deploy AI systems, they are discovering their critical business data is trapped in silos, controlled by vendors, or simply not accessible to the system that need it. As we all know, Airbyte has been making waves in enterprise data integration space, taking on incumbents like Firetrend with an fully open source approach that gives organizations more control and flexibility. Now they are rolling out major updates to their on-prem enterprise product designed to put data sovereignty, security, and AI readiness directly into the hands of their customers. I'm joined by once again Michel Tricot, CEO of Airbyte, to talk about the new release, the AI opportunities, and how open source is changing the game for enterprise data pipelines. Michel, it's great to have you back on the show.
Good to be there, Swapnil. Good to see you again.
Michel, let's start with the basics for our viewers. What is Airbyte all about? Let's just give them a quick overview so that they understand the company before we dive into what you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So Airbyte is an open source data movement platform, meaning that our mission is really to help our community and our customers to just address every type of data silos that they might have internally. So how do you get access and make this data actionable? So pulling data from different data systems, bringing it into a place where it will bring a lot of value. So if you take the analytics use case, that will be data warehouses, that will be databases, et cetera, et cetera. And when we're thinking more about the AI use case, it's like, how do you make this first-party data more available to agentic systems? So it's really about breaking down the barrier of data.
Excellent. Thank you. So, what is the biggest story here? What are you folks working on and planning to announce? Let's just walk our audience through what's coming next.
When we started Airbyte, like the mission we had was really around like, how do we make sure that every single data engineers, every single team that is dealing with data can have a very simple system, very reliable system to bring data into a place where it delivers value. And we started very much as like the first open source project that has the ability to build a lot of connectors. We have, and if we look back, if we look today, we have like more than 1,000 contributors to the project that are building connectors, maintaining connectors, and sometimes even building their own connector on the side. The thing that has happened, and this is really, I believe, the power of open source, and also all the constraints that go when you're dealing with data, is because we're open source, a lot of these companies are actually using Airbyte because that's one of the only solutions that you can have full control over. So we call that the sovereignty of the data. And so all these companies have been adopting open source. We've built a product around that. And typically, like one of the big focus we've had over the past year and the past year and a half, and something that we are really releasing as a product, like fully fledged product in September, is a product that we call Flex, which is basically the ability to have the ease of use of a cloud product, but also the sovereignty of where the data plane is actually running. So it's a mix between the cloud offering and the open source data plane that we have. So that's a pretty big step forward, and something that is really allow us to be very strong when you look at the overall ecosystem in data and with our competitors.
When we look at this competitive landscape, who are you really targeting as competitors with this open source approach? And what pain points are you seeing in the data pipelines, especially when AI workloads come into play?
In terms of competitors, I would put like the Informaticas of the world, Clicks, Fivetran, et cetera, and all of them are either what I would call like legacy platform that require a lot of expertise in like how to use the product, or others are more like limited in terms of how many data silos they can actually break down. So that's really the like what the ecosystem is looking like today. And yes, today we've very much like surpassed a lot of this incumbent in terms of the flexibility that Airbyte offers, and all of that is really like pushed by the community and also pushed by this new workload. So when we think about why it's so complex to do that, is whenever you control the network, so basically data movement in our case, you have no control on where what the source looks like, and you have no control over what the destination looks like. What you're responsible for is really making sure that the data goes from point A to point B and does it in a reliable way. And when you're integrating with like thousands of different sources, you can imagine that each of these sources is a company that has their own product roadmap, that has their own data migration, data changes, etc., etc. And this is a place where, and I do believe that the only way to solve that is with the help of a community. Is we have the ability to just adapt very, very fast to all these sources changes. Like if they change, if you have you're pulling data from a CRM and suddenly instead of calling a specific field of data, instead of calling it names, they call it first name. Well, all your downstream data pipelines are going to break. And then you will have to wait for a vendor to fix it, to update the schema, et cetera, et cetera. And because of the open nature of Airbyte, you can do it yourself and automatically the whole community benefits from it. And like, yes, the analytics use case was a very, very strong use case for us. But with AI, it's actually very different. And I think it also brings new concerns when it comes to data sovereignty. Now every time we sign contract with customers, there is always a mention about we're not going to train models on top of the data that is flowing through your system. So there is a lot of like all these companies are becoming very, very conscious about what happened with that data. And that is something that we offer to them, which is, you know what? You can do whatever you want. We provide the pipes. We will never see what's in the pipes. And you can start feeding this data into your rack platform, into your agentic system, and we'll never see any piece of data. The only thing we provide is the framework and the pipes.
Here's a two-parter for you. How are those incumbents responding to what you're doing, and what value are CTOs, developers, and AI engineers actually seeing when they choose Airbyte over these traditional players?
In terms of how incumbent are responding to it, they're all looking at, I think the market of data is really realizing how important it is to give the control over the data to your customer and not be the bottleneck or the CEO type of company. So in terms of how they're adapting, they're starting to build some of these additional product that can run on their customer infrastructure, whether it's like multi-cloud or hybrid type of deployment. So I would say that's a place where we are very much like leading a lot of the yeah of the discussion when it comes to data sovereignty. The other part of why CTOs and engineers like to be using platform is, I think it's just the nature of open source. Like what you have with open source is, in a way, you're avoiding vendor lock-in, and you also have the agency on how your stack, how your infrastructure is going to evolve. There is no real lock-in. Of course, yes, if you need to change to a different tool, you will have a migration step. But the data, the credentials you've collected, the configuration you have, all of that can be migrated in a fairly easy way. And if you just need to tune the platform to work for your specific use case, especially when it comes to data, like you have that in your hand and you have the power to do it. So I don't know, like if you're a company like Invesco and they have a very sensitive internal API, the only choice they have is either they build something themselves to pull data from this API and bring it into their downstream system, or they use Airbyte, because that's the only solution that can have that level of flexibility to address and to future-proof what these companies are looking to do.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room, AI, and of course, data risk. From your customer conversations, what concerns are they bringing up about data privacy and security? And what new AI related risks are emerging that maybe even they are not aware of yet?
So here, I think we really are in the like very fun, like basic human behavior. When you have something that is new that is coming and you don't know what can happen with it, the thing you want is you want to bring it as close as possible to you. And we kept talking about all the open source products, etc., etc. But what I find is a very strong like indicator that there is a need from the market to just get things as close as possible to them is the fact that so many models are now open source, and even OpenAI, I think they announced it like 2 weeks ago, that they are also playing the game of open source because they know that the way you give confidence to this new organization to innovate on this new technology is by giving them a level of certainty that the risk, if one exists, is only limited on them and not on a vendor. And that to me, even if you look at like geopolitical challenges today, like the secret here is just bring the thing closer to you. And the only thing that can get closer to you is if you can deploy it in your own infrastructure, is if you can control and create a safety perimeter around it. And whether it's for data infrastructure, whether for AI, we can really see that this is the direction that the market is taking. My guess is we're probably going to be there for like at least 5 years where open source is going to really, really lead the charge here. While in the meantime, that will create some confidence in people that, oh yeah, maybe I can use that extra external vendor. And for like very specific use case, I will do it. But for now, data, AI, intelligence, they want to keep it close.
I have been covering open source from day one of my journalism career, but I'm always curious that whether customers really care about open source that much anymore, especially in the AI space, which is not as simple as a lamp stick. There is so much complexity with models, framework, cloud deployment. How do you balance ownership, cloud convenience, and open source benefits?
There is a level of confidence that, and here, yes, we can talk about the main three cloud provider, like Azure, AWS, GCP, and other, but you also have like the more local ones that countries are really pushing. I mean, obviously, I come from France, and you can see that the French government, a lot of the French companies are also looking to use more of the local clouds that exist. But there is a level of trust, and I think the market has been educated enough to trust that public cloud have a level of security and safety around it. But those are like very much like raw resources. But the moment you start, and they trust it. Now, I wouldn't say that companies just go for open source because it's open source. They mostly go for open source because of the value that open source bring them, which is it brings them control. So they can use their multi-cloud, they can use their hybrid deployment, their public cloud, but like the moment they have created that perimeter of security, now they want to bring the elements and the building blocks on which they have control on. And that to me is really the appeal of open source. Like it could be, I don't know if we should call it like it's because it's open source that they take it, but it's very much about the value that it's giving them. The auditability of it. Like the last thing you want is to have a vendor that is doing something fishy behind the scene and not knowing. I mean, you want to be responsible. If something bad happened, you only have yourself to blame at that point. You don't have a vendor that you have to trust to tell you what has happened.
We are seeing companies at different stages of AI adoption, some early adopters, other more cautious. How does your open source approach helps companies become more AI ready and move faster than they could with legacy setups?
I think it all comes down from what were the principles on which the I won't call them legacy because some of them are still like just 5 or 10 years old, but more like the previous world technology has been built. And the level of compatibility that exists with a world in which you're building, knowing that the person making the decision or going through the process is not a person anymore. It's a GPU doing the work for you. So for me, it's more, there is a, a migration that needs to happen between how people were thinking about product development, data access, permissioning, security. And I would say that's probably the reason why some of these things are taking a little bit longer because, I mean, if you're a 50 years old company and you've been building your whole product, your whole organization on this type of premises, then you need to reinvent yourself in a way. And the way you do it is by just adopting bit by bit some of this technology and making sure that like at the top level, at the executive level, you really have a strategy. I think we can make a very strong parallel today with what has happened with going from on-prem to cloud services. You look at what was cloud in 2007. Nobody wanted to put their resources on AWS, but bit by bit, they started also to go through this like migration where they would start migrating a small service into it, and then they would pull more and more of this. And I think that's the same thing that's going to happen when you're thinking about developing and building technology with this new paradigm.
And when companies do decide to get on board, when they do try to scale AI, where do they typically stumble with data integration? And what are the biggest roadblocks you are seeing? And how does Airbyte help solve them?
The first thing that happens in general when a company is looking at what can I do with data? What can I do with AI? The first thing they're looking at is, okay, I'm going to build a chatbot and I'm going to ask questions about things because that's how we're being educated. That's how like OpenAI, Anthropic, and all these companies have completely blew up is because suddenly you're giving a very simple interface on which people can ask questions. The thing is like, obviously, these two services, they're only trained on public data. So it's good when you want to write a document, making it prettier, etc., etc. But the moment you need to have this context about writing document, writing, or like creating new processes, you need to inject this first party data. You need to inject your company knowledge into these systems. And this is where like a lot of companies, when they're adopting AI are actually struggling. And we could even say as a stretch, that's probably one of the reasons why Informatica was acquired by Salesforce, like Salesforce looking to build agent force. Well, to make this agent relevant, they need to have access to a lot more context than just what the model can provide. And Informatica, in a way, give them access to all these like existing pipes that all these enterprises have been building over the years. And that's really the role that Airbyte is playing. We're basically connecting and recreating like modern pipes between sources to these new systems.
Now let's look at it from a developer's perspective. How does working with open source plus on-prem change their experience compared to proprietary closed source alternatives?
I think we all know it. Myself, as a developer of open source and user of open source, I do my side project. What am I going to do? I'm going to pull a technology that is open source. I don't need to ask security. I don't need to ask procurement because I know I can create a safety perimeter around it. And boom, I can start playing with it. And that I think is one of the main reasons why open source is just taking over the world is like suddenly you have like millions of developers who wants to innovate, who don't want to be talking to like 10 different teams to be able to use the tool. They will find the open source alternative to it. They will start installing it, experiment with it, have their first success, and then it propagates and it grows within this organization. So that to me is why, especially as an open source company, why having a very, very strong community, a very strong community of users is important. People want to see, okay, I need to move data from point A to point B. What is the standard? Okay, there are 5 different vendors. Oh, there is also Airbyte. Oh, let me try. It's going to take me 5 minutes to get up and running.
If I ask you, what advice would you give to CIOs and CTOs who are evaluating their data integration strategy right now? And why they should look at Airbyte and open source solutions?
For me, it's a few things. The first one is when you're investing in a new technology, you need to have some level of certainty around, like, you don't know what are going to be all your use cases in the future. So you need to be thinking about, yes, I know what I need today, but I also need to have some level of ideas of how that things needs to evolve in the future. And the last thing you want is to be locked down in like a vendor that has a different direction from what you have. The advantage that you have with open source is that it will solve a problem very well. And if one day you need to go a little bit further, like flexibility of open source becomes a massive advantage, and your investment will bear fruits for like a longer time than if you were going for like a closed source vendor. For CIO, I would say like I would just tell them like protect your company gold. So when you're thinking about data, I have maybe a simplified vision of how the world is, probably because I work in data, but data represents your company. Data represents the processes that exist internally. First, it's an IP. Like software is not the only IP you own. Your data is your IP, and make sure that you securely and safely manage that data. But at the same time, do it in a way that doesn't block your team. And that's yet again a place where open source has big advantage because you can create the right security, the right sandboxing, the right thing, but you always know deep down that yes, the data is never going to leave my cloud and go to a different vendor. I know I don't have a liability because suddenly all my SSN numbers, my social security numbers are available on a vendor. Like it's on my cloud and I know what I'm doing.
Here is a fundamental issue. AI cannot deliver results without the right data behind it. Can you talk about this specific challenge of getting quality data to AI tools? Because without that foundation, none of it matters.
To me, like the most important part when you're building agents is like the completude, like how complete the data sets you're looking at is. And it can come from public product or like private, like a vendor product that you're using. It can come from your own internal system. It can come from like unstructured data that you might have. Like this is something that was extremely expensive to do something with. And now it's like we've opened up like a whole set of data that is available. And as people are thinking to AI right now was so much at the beginning that you need to create for yourself like the flexibility to connect to all these new data sets that your agent will need. Like maybe today your agent is going to be is going to do very well with like these three data sources, but then you want this agent to become smarter, to do more actions or to delegate tasks to other agents. And those will need different subsets of data. And this is where like how flexible and how fast you can actually build this data route is going to become for like a company that is looking to innovate in that domain. Unstructured data is something that was completely untapped before, super expensive. You needed to create massive teams in other countries to just do the data entry, etc. Now you can automate that. So those are new routes of data that you need to bring in, and you need to create those. And open source is a pretty, like, and Airbyte obviously is a pretty good way to just create these new like routes of data.
As I said earlier, we have seen plenty of AI projects fail because the data foundation was not there. What mistakes are teams making and how can they avoid them?
You want to create a secure system, but you cannot slow down innovation here. Like there is a race that is happening today, and the companies that are moving the fastest are going to win. So when it comes to data, you have your own policies, etc. But you need to really enable the team that is building the product of tomorrow to have access to that data. That's the only way the application they are building is going to is going to be relevant. And also the thing is you cannot just block data all the time because you never know which type of data is going to make that product successful. What insight you can bring to that agent that will make that agent performing like 10 times better than what it is today. So that's a place where you need to unleash data in a safe way. And that's why people are looking to also do it very much into their own infrastructure.
Now let's bring Airbyte into this picture. How does Airbyte handle that tricky balance between keeping data secure while making it accessible enough for AI innovations?
Yeah. So this is a place where we've invested a lot in two places. Like one is obviously the securing within the platform who has access to what type of sources, what type of destination, but with very easy way to just do like allow specific teams to have access to new data sets. The other part is, and this one is more specific to unstructured data, is to make sure that metadata about the data is actually propagated down. So if you're pulling data from a document management system that has a ton of permissions, you have to make sure that these permissions are being propagated down. The last thing you want is to pull data from HRS because you're building something that is related to HRS, and suddenly everyone who has access to the chatbot, or the company-wide chatbot or the agent can suddenly see everyone's salaries. So this is a place where you need to make sure like this type of metadata gets propagated down as you're implementing data access within your agent. And that's a place where a lot of companies are making mistakes today. And it's fine when you're doing an MVP because you want to have as little friction as possible, but you cannot think of that as a second. It cannot be a secondary thought. It has to be, you need to be thinking about who will have access to that chatbot, which agent will be operating on that data, what data they can have access to. So you need to put a lot of processes there after the MVP, obviously, but you have to have a strategy.
Before we wrap this up, I'm curious, beyond AI, what other major trends are you seeing that are shaping how companies think about data integration, and where else can Airbyte play a role there?
I would say here we're very much in the more like traditional analytics landscape. You know, when you think about what the world looked like 15 years ago, only bigger companies had access to that data or had access to like the technology that would allow them to make more data informed decision. And there is and some were just laggards that would not do it. And I think this is a place where a lot of companies are basically facing two waves. The first one is they need to do and to start leveraging the data. Plus, they also need to use this for like agentic system and AI. So there is still this very strong fundamental that you need to build when it comes to analytics, because analytics is what? It's your ability to understand the past. If you cannot understand the past, you're going to make the same mistake in the future.
Michel, thanks for joining me and breaking down how Airbyte is tackling AI's biggest hidden challenge, the data. Thanks for sharing your great insights. It's always a learning experience to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Swapnil. This was a great time.
And to our listeners, if your company is working on tough problems in AI infrastructure or data integration, we would love to hear your story. Please don't hesitate and reach out to our teams. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next conversation.